Entrepreneurs, and today we have our special segment of In the Weeds. Walter Sullivan joining me in the studio. Hi, Walter. Great to see you.
Jonathan, it's going to be fun. I miss having Jeffrey here, but he must be high somewhere else.
We won't miss him. We'll have a great time here today, and we're welcoming back a guest who's been here before, Michael Dundas, CEO of Sira Naturals. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
I know
back.
This is not your first rodeo here, so welcome back. And
glad to be back.
Look to hear the updates of what's going on in your world.
Jonathan, you want to meet a true entrepreneur, a kid that started out from nothing and worked his way up. This is the guy you want to meet, and he can really help people understand how this business works. Why don't you explain about how you got started again? You've already said this a few times, but we'll get into the show a little bit more. But
Walter, I guess the 30-second overview is didn't have any experience in the cannabis business prior to starting Sira Naturals back in 2013. Had lived in the Bay Area of California for a number of years, saw the evolution of medical marijuana out there. And when I learned that medical marijuana had passed here in November 2012 in Massachusetts, my home state, decided to come back and just really looked at the regulations and the law, tried to comport my activities exactly to the expectations of what the program was looking for. Put together a board of directors, made an application. Look, we worked very hard, but we also got very lucky. We got one of these first 9 licenses to produce, in a vertically integrated way, medical marijuana. And then we had to set out trying to raise capital for this company. And keep in mind now, we were required to be nonprofit at the time, federally illegal business, no business experience to speak of, no collateral for the loans. It was a very difficult finance pitch. And so, it became very clear to me early on I was looking for a very boutique kind of investor, someone not only who had the capital at hand to risk, but also someone that saw over the hill on cannabis, on medical marijuana, and just the cannabis industry in general. And I was very, very fortunate to find several of those types of folks to help seed this organization. And then we built it organically from the ground up. We designed a cultivation facility, and then eventually were able to put up 3 retail facilities.
I think the interesting part about it is that out of those 9 and then went into 18, that you and maybe 1 or 2 others were truly Massachusetts grown business. I mean, your investors are all Massachusetts residents, born and raised here.
Yeah, it's true, and we're very proud of that. I think it also is reflected in our. Excuse me. Take 2.
Get all choked up over it.
Yeah, right.
Sort of reflecting on it.
I think it's reflected in our success as well. I think regulated cannabis it's a very difficult business to navigate from a regulatory perspective, but also we have to remember we're in an emerging cultural phenomenon that is the emerging legal cannabis business. And an understanding of the sort of folkways and mores and the ways people think about cannabis in the Northeast and in Boston and Massachusetts in particular was very helpful for our ultimate success.
Now, I think that's 2012. We created medical marijuana, and you got involved in that. Now comes 2016 with adult use, and they gave a priority to register marijuana dispensaries into economic empowerment applicants. As part of Sira Naturals, which is our RMD, one of the things you looked at is seeing how economic empowerment applicants weren't going to have an easy time moving forward. But you guys developed some programs to help them. Why don't you explain some of the programs you developed?
It's true. When we first saw the license types coming out from the Cannabis Control Commission, we saw sort of micro business license types and the orientation toward trying to allow access for smaller and economic empowerment entrants into the space. And it occurred to us, after having just built this medical business, how difficult that was going to be. And so we came up with an idea that we thought really was clever in the sense that it aligned the business interest of both big and small to sort of take smaller organizations that were aspiring to get these licenses, bring them into our facilities, help them understand the challenges. Excuse me. So understand the challenges they were going to face, kind of give them some training, and then help them put their product actually on the shelf in our dispensary, actually put some sort of licensing dollars in their pocket to help them finance their eventual building.
Not only are you helping them develop a product, but you're also willing to supply them a place to put those products.
That's correct, and I think that's critically important, that it's not just a program that's for skills training, it's not just a program for professional development, it's also a program aimed at actually economically benefiting these potential applicants.
It's really interesting, Michael. In a lot of ways, you're so vertically integrated and probably somewhat unique in that regard, but also beyond that, now you're looking to the exterior, the full marketplace, and saying, how can we develop the market as a whole? And so it sort of expands your model even further further into vertically integrating.
It's true, and that idea wasn't lost on us. Vertical integration. I think any business at first blush would say, "Wow, vertical integration, this is great. We control the entire supply chain. Margins don't compress." At the end of the day, though, there's a lot of challenges involved with vertical integration. You've got to be great at everything, and the idea, that one company could be great at all of these different verticals, it's just not possible. And so when we took a look at the business, with the advent of adult use, when we know that these license types are going to be divided up into a variety of different verticals, the cultivation, the products manufacturing, the retail, we thought, look, where is there, which one of these spaces is most ripe for innovation, most ripe for development? And it came very clear to us that it was product manufacturing. The form factors that you can create for cannabis are virtually endless. And the sort of branding and packaging stories you can tell about any product are virtually endless. And so we thought to ourselves, well, why are we going to be so hubristic as to think that we're going to be able to keep creating the best of the best of the best of these products? Let's farm that out to entrepreneurs. Right. Yeah.
Well, Michael, is interesting. One of our guests today is infused ice cream.
Oh, that's great.
We'll be discussing with the creamery a little later today about discussing infusing ice cream and how he's moving his product forward. One of the things you do is you're actually located in Milford, your cultivation facility and your manufacturing facility. As we know, there's an issue of supply and demand, both for flower and for products. You've made a conscious decision to grow your cultivation in order to be able to meet that demand on behalf not only of your own, but also for economic empowerment applicants and other retail establishments. Excuse me. Good thing I'm not coughing like you. Why don't you explain what your plan is and what your plan was in making that?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to understand or to remember that even now, all these years into the program, we're still seeing the adjustment of the emerging supply chain in cannabis in Massachusetts. Because of the federal prohibition on cannabis, every cannabis program essentially is a walled garden within the boundaries of the state. And so within the state of Massachusetts, we have to stand up an entire supply chain. That's very difficult to do when you've got a number of different actors all working in their own self-interest. And so when we took a look at the lay of the land, it seemed very clear to us that the existing medical cultivation infrastructure was not going to be enough to support an adult use marketplace. Now, there are adult use cultivation only licenses that have been granted and they're being built now. But again, after having the experience of building one of these businesses and knowing how many things can go wrong, just how difficult it is to actually stand up a big cultivation facility, we decided that there was definitely going to be a window of time where there was going to be a tightness of supply. I think over the long haul, we're going to see that go the way that this industry has gone in many other Western states, which is as supply comes online, it will eventually reach equilibrium. We might actually end up 36 months or more down the road seeing an oversupply of cannabis flower. But I think in the interim now, we've got an extreme tightness, and we're trying to build as fast as we can to alleviate that.
Now, how many
short
square
term.
feet did you start with, and how many are you going to have at the end?
So it depends on how you measure square feet. So we've got a 30,000 square foot footprint of a building, and even in the grow, certain measures, people use different measures. So in Massachusetts, we have a term we call canopy, and canopy measures all of the different stages of plant growth combined. So at the Milford facility, we have 13,000 square feet of canopy. We're currently building about 20,000 feet of canopy, and then an additional probably 65,000 feet of canopy will be coming online in 2021.
So fascinating. All this obviously done under artificial environment, right? You've created indoors environments. Is that a competitive disadvantage relative to other parts of the country where they've got external capabilities? So do you foresee the ability to farm in Massachusetts?
Well, it is certainly a disadvantage relative to other parts of the country. Again, the federal prohibition creates this firewall. Now, if the federal prohibition were to go away and all of a sudden cannabis activity were to be freely, sort of fungible between states, interstate commerce was no longer prohibited, I think it would be very difficult. We'd all have to take a long, hard look at our business model to ensure that we weren't going to get put out of business by the sort of Emerald Triangle region of California, which can grow this stuff very inexpensively. So long as it's an intrastate endeavor, then we got to look at, okay, what are sort of ambient climate parameters that we're involved with here? I mean, again, the sort of Northern California is the ideal climate Very different from what we have here. In California, you've got these sort of 70 to 85 degree days all day, every day in the hills of Mendocino County, never a drop of rain, very low humidity. That's the ideal climate for cannabis cultivation. Here in Massachusetts, we have very hot and humid summers. We have very cold and actually quite humid winters as well. And humidity is the enemy of the cannabis plant, certainly the enemy of commercial production. And so, I think that it's going to be very difficult for folks looking to do outdoor production of cannabis for anything other than trying to create cannabis for extractions for cannabis oil, because you can extract and create a very good product with cannabis flower that wouldn't otherwise be able to be sold as flower outdoors.
And I imagine that's also one of those situations where you've got to produce a lot to yield a little bit in terms of extraction.
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
So volume is key.
That's correct. So volume would be key. I think generally speaking, we've seen the vast majority of businesses in Massachusetts choose indoor cultivation, even though it's more expensive, more cumbersome to build. It does produce a much higher quality product.
Now, we're starting to go to somewhat of a style of greenhouses to try to use a little bit of the sun to be energy efficient. How do you think that's going to work out here?
I think that's the million-dollar question. I'll tell you, we've gone back and forth in the design of our new facilities. We looked very carefully at greenhouse. In the end, we opted to continue to go indoor for a variety of reasons. It was a very spirited debate. We've got a lot of folks on our team that were vociferous advocates of greenhouse. I think one of the misconceptions, though, is that because of the humidity requirements in cannabis cultivation, you can't have what we would consider today here to be a traditional greenhouse, which is a greenhouse that has open ridge vents, open air to the outside. And so essentially, if you do build a greenhouse, you're building almost like a very modified, enclosed greenhouse.
Special use.
It's very special use greenhouse. You're almost building an indoor grow with a glass roof.
That's really what it comes down to.
And
it's
so,
a building that has a glass roof.
That's right.
To be able to.
And then you start thinking about, well, okay, how do you insulate that in the winter? And there's all kinds of trade-offs season by season, and you end up with this weird calculation where, you know what, it actually doesn't really pay to do it at all.
And that's where you get into people, because when they think of a greenhouse, they think of all glass. Well, you can't really do that in Massachusetts because of temperatures, and it's not cost efficient.
That's right. And look, I'm more than anybody, I'm excited to see these new projects come online. I very much hope that they're successful. I hope we can learn from them, and I hope that we can eventually all try to crack this code of bringing down the cost of electricity for cannabis cultivation, because that's a big problem.
We talked about supply and demand. And you explain the time span of building out, because I think people don't really realize is that you get a license, adult license to cultivate. How long does it really take for you to be able to say you have product for sale?
It takes a long time. I would say that probably a safe estimate would be about 2 years from the time you're licensed. If you don't have a shovel in the ground, about 2 years from the time you're licensed. You got to do your design development process, bring in your architects, design the facility, get all your local permitting, start to build the facility. Building the facility probably would take you 6 to 9 months in itself. And then one of the hardest parts is getting the facility tuned. We call it the commissioning process, where you make sure that all of your systems, these are complicated environmental control systems, or
again, regulatory issues and
regulatory
compliance.
issues, inspections, that kind of thing. And then you put your first seed in the ground, and cross your fingers that you're going to get a 4-month cycle, which is typically the seed to sale timeline. But usually what happens is something goes wrong, something isn't calibrated quite right. You lose a couple of months in that initial cultivation round process. All in all, my safe over-under would be about 2 years.
No, and that really creates an issue as we bring retail stores online, being able to meet the demand.
That's right. That's right. And so I think that we have developed a small but important group of experts in the Commonwealth so far in the initial medicals that have gone through all of those gone through that learning curve. And so we've seen those folks, including Sira Naturals, expanding their cultivation facilities. So we all hope to try to meet that demand. But I think that the estimate is that in the near term, meaning sort of even 12 to 18 months, we're not going to meet that demand.
Let me ask you a question. So we talked earlier about the adult use statute created 2 priorities. Mm-hmm. One is for economic empowerment, the other is for RMD. Is the RMD part of it really part of it? Because one, the expense that it costs of getting into business, but the only way to meet the demand is by licensing the RMDs to be fully utilized for both cultivation, processing, and retail. That's the only way we're going to be able to meet the demand, by allowing you to fully get into business because you can supply yourself as well as retail establishments. Do you think that is part of the reason why the statute was written that way?
I do. I can't say I get into the mind of the legislature, but I think that from what I have gleaned from the process, that there was a desire to get the industry up and running very quickly, and giving RMDs priority status would have accomplished just that. Excuse me. And for some RMDs, it has. So we've seen all of the initial adult use facilities that have opened were initially RMDs. And I think we're going to continue to see that roll forward. I think economic empowerment is an important policy goal. I think it's been articulated strongly both from the state level and from a number of municipalities. I think it's a laudable goal. I think we support it as an industry as well. I think interestingly, and perhaps ironically, the cannabis industry is full of participants that are more predisposed than other industry competitors in other industries to help each other. I mean, we all sort of have been through this process together. You can't be a cannabis business participant without having some cognizance of cannabis culture and some cognizance of cannabis public policy in the past.
And it's interesting. We have only one social equity / general applicant who has a retail store, Caroline's Cannabis.
That's right. That's right.
And the only way she's able to be into business is because of the RMDs providing them with flower and products.
That's true in the initial stages, speed to market, no question about it. Caroline's Cannabis is a great example of a very scrappy entrepreneurial company with heart. Those guys put everything into that business, and we're very, very happy to see them be successful.
It's really fascinating, and Michael, to hear you talk about sort of the evolution of the industry and where it's come from, and the fact that it's a friendly competition within the industry, and everybody's fighting the same battles trying to get this off the ground. But and you're a leader in that field, so kudos to you and congratulations for leading the way and helping other businesses get off the ground in an evolving industry.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Our guest in the weeds has been Michael Dundas, CEO of Sira Naturals. Walter Sullivan joining me in the weeds. It's been great to have you on, Michael, and look forward to hearing the next phase of the evolution of Sira Naturals.
Great. Thanks so much.
Michael.
And we'll be right back with another segment on In the Weeds.